Hello, everyone. This is your favorite doctor of education. My channel is called Take the Meat, Spit Out the Bones. I will be sharing information from education research that has tons of meat, but you may find some bones in the message. Just throw those aside and focus on the meat of the video's message. Today, we will be discussing how can we make co-teaching work. Okay, so I don't know if you have looked at my other videos. I talked about the benefits of co-teaching. I've also talked about the negatives of co-teaching and the problems with co-teaching. So this is where I talk about um, how to make it work. If you're admin, if you're education leader, if you are an instructional leader, if you're an instructional coach, or if you are co-teachers, you can send this video to your admin. And also they can hire me to help them out. Please have them email me at takethemeatspitoutthebones@gmail.com. All right, so this is what I do. This is my profession. I have my own business doing this, and most of our work is working on co-teaching and making it more effective. But there are certain things that need to be put in place for it to actually work. So there needs to be some right structures, right, to be put in place. That, of course, anything I suggest in this video is easier said than done. Oftentimes, admin education leaders may not have the structural capacity to make this work, but these are things that you can make work with the right structures. First, you need to have a school-wide goals on co-teaching and a strategic plan on implementing these goals. It should be a multi-year plan on how you're going to roll out co-teaching, how you're going to make it successful, how are you going to monitor it, how are you going to, observe the teachers, do some walkthroughs, all that, right? So you need to have a strategic plan. Who are the actors in the building who will be implementing co-teaching? You can hire me. Hello, how you doing? Hire me to help you out. You need to develop a culture in your building of collaboration. This is easier said than done because there are some people who don't like each other in buildings, right? So, but you need to develop a culture of collaboration. Okay, so these are some technical things. That of course I will be publishing in my own book, right? But then also you can get this book, Leading the Co-Teaching Dance, Leadership Strategies to Enhance Team Outcomes by Marowski and I think Deeker. Marowski, she publishes heavily on co-teaching. Marilyn Friends publish heavily. I think Marilyn Friend Burns publish heavily. So these are some of the theorists amongst many, many, many others, right? So some of the things I'm saying in this video comes from that, but a lot of the things are from just my practice being in classrooms. Okay. You need to have co-planning time, right? Okay. So this doesn't work if they can't plan. You need to have common co-planning time for all the separate co-teachers, right? Also, you need to develop co-planning time for service providers, serving the kids in special classes or self-contained classes. Everyone needs to be talking about kids. They need to be planning for kids, right? Also, including paraprofessionals in those co-planning meetings would be advisable. Of course, this is ideal, right? Structures may not attune to be able to do that, but they need common planning time weekly, actually multiple times per week, right? So you may actually give co-teachers an extra common planning time a week, a prep time, right? Yes, your union contract says this, but realistically, they need more time to co-plan. You need to limit people's partners. People have way too many partners. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 partners. They can't have all these co-teaching partners. I remember one school I was in last year. This woman has 6 co-teaching partners. All she's gonna do is sit down and stare. She's gonna be the assistant in the room. She's gonna be, a para in the room, right? But she's a full-time teacher. Why do you have her co-teaching with 6 people? That makes no sense. Actually, before I even start with that, you may not even know what co-teaching is. So actually, let me just let me show you right now what is actually co-teaching. Co-teaching is a collaborative approach to instruction in which two teachers, typically a general education teacher and a special education teacher, work together to plan and then implement instruction for a class that includes students with disabilities and also students without disabilities. So co-taught, it's a part of the continuum of services for students with disabilities. When they get identified, if they're in special ed for some years, they will be put into certain classrooms, a placement, right? Co-taught is like in the middle from least restrictive to the most restrictive. So there's students with disabilities in a classroom with students without disabilities being taught by a general educator and a special educator. Forgot to mention that. Okay, if you didn't know what I was talking about. Okay, so also co-teachers and co-taught rooms need to have equitable resources and a parity of resources. So the general educator can have a desk, the special educator should have a desk. They should have comparative resources, right? They should be both seen as the teachers in the room. They need to both have access to the curriculum along with the powers in the room, right? If you can't afford it, everyone teaches from Promethean boards. You can't have two Promethean boards. That's a lot of power being used in the classroom. Hopefully your buildings are up to date with electricity. But if not that, remember, we used to teach from a chalkboard. We used to teach from a dry erase board. We should have chart paper. You can have those other resources. If one teacher is teaching from the Promethean board, the other teacher can have a dry erase board. Position the dry erase board to be in the opposite side of the Promethean board, so they're not in the same direction, right? So the kids' backs are to each other, right? So they're faced in different directions. Also, they need to have bigger rooms. ICT classrooms need to have bigger rooms because they're going to be probably moving around desk a lot. There should be designated rooms for co-taught rooms. And then if you can't do that, make sure that you have consecutive co-taught classes coming from period 1, 2, 3, 4, and then probably have a lunch break where there's no one in the room. So if they need to move the classroom back into, like, say, rows or how it was for just a gen ed class, they have time to do so, because that's the biggest issue in secondary. Secondary teachers would say, hey, there's another classroom coming in right after this, and I don't have time to put back the classroom the way it was before we did station teaching or parallel teaching, right? So you need to have consecutive periods where those classes are co-taught, designated co-taught rooms, or you need to have classes just for co-teaching. So there's no expectation that the room has to look a particular way, right? Because we want to recommend them doing stations and parallel and alternative teaching. Not the whole group instruction every day, all day. No, there's 2, 3, 4 people in a room co-teaching. Why do we have one teach, one assist being the primary dominant co-teaching model? They need to be doing smaller group instruction in these classrooms, right? That is advisable. Kids move more, will participate more, learn more in small groups than having everyone learn from one teacher, 32 kids in one class listening to one teacher. If we have 2, 3 teachers in the room, why are we having whole group instruction? It doesn't make sense, which is why they need to have co-planning time so they can plan to do all these things, right, that I'm recommending, right? Also, big thing, the teachers need to know the content they're teaching, right? I know this is easier said than done, right? You have your budgets, you have this, you have that, but you cannot have that 8th grade teacher, special educator, going to English, history, science, math, following that class. Do they know all those subjects to that level? Right? They need to be paired with the content of their expertise. This is easier said than done, but if you want them to actually teach, they have to know what they're teaching. And let me just say as well, as a teacher, if you don't know it, you have to learn it. That's not an excuse anymore. If you don't know American history, you have to learn American history. You just have to know more than the students that you're teaching. That's it. You don't have to know everything. You just have to know more than your students. Okay. Also, peer teachers who volunteer. People need to volunteer to be co-teachers. Don't just put them in co-teachers. Easier said than done, because a lot of times everyone is a co-teacher, but people have to volunteer to do it, right? You must match personality types. Give them personality tests. See which personalities work well with one another. Pair them based on their varying skill set. So if you have a teacher who's really good in ELA, and then you have another teacher who's really good in math and science, maybe that's a good pair, right? People don't know everything, right? So you want to pair people with varying personality skill sets, subject area skill sets, right? Pair them accordingly. You have to take some time to do this, right? Don't do it in a rush decision. And then you want to also keep pairs together that work consistently. Stop changing people constantly every single year, right? Require them to do stations, parallel, alternative teaching. I'll probably do another video on this. I know there's some videos on YouTube, tons of information on station, parallel, and alternative teaching, but require them to do that. No one teach, one assist, limit whole group instruction. Also limit teaming, limit one teach, one observe, right? Limit these. If they do it, it has to be minimal for specific purposes, but it doesn't make sense to have two teachers in the room doing whole group instruction every single day, all day, just teaming. It doesn't make sense, because if you have been in the amount of classrooms I have been in, when you have two teachers teaming, it's like one teacher is teaching, right? So if I have a co-teacher right here with me, I'm saying a sentence, I'm waiting, then she says a sentence, then I say a sentence, then she says a sentence, then I say a sentence, and she says, that's just one person speaking, right? It doesn't make sense. I should have a group, she should have a group, right? Then if we're doing station teaching, then we switch. I teach my group, she teaches her group, then we switch. And I teach her group the same thing, that vice versa. Or subject areas. I have reading, she has writing. I like reading, right? We switch. Obviously, the time has to be the same, right? So maybe writing or math, right? I teach writing, she teaches math, and then we switch, right? So we're teaching smaller groups, the same different parts of a subject area or different subject areas in itself, right? So you need to require this. They must be co-planning all lessons, slides, co-assessing students together. You may require this at first and then let loosen up along the way. But if I were you, I would require people to submit a separate lesson plan or something saying what is their role in this lesson every period. What is your role, right? Have there's tons of documents that you can use from Marowski, from various entities, Marilyn Friend, that, hey, just put a couple of sentences. What are you doing in this lesson? What is your role? You need to give them training and coaching over years. This is where I come in. You need to give them training and coaching over years to be able to effectively implement this. Give them time to reflect on their practices. Do not make co-taught classes a dumping ground for students in gen ed who are low and who have behavior problems. If I were you, I'll put high students from gen ed and or gifted students in the same class with students with disabilities in those co-taught classes. Pair them together instead of you having so-called low students in gen ed with students with disabilities. Also, you need to have child study meetings every single month. Bring people who are teaching the same kids together, co-taught teachers or co-teaching pairs, service providers, to talk about the kids apart from the individualized education program or plan meeting, right? Stop pulling teachers from co-taught classes to cover other classes. Legally, they should be there together, right? If one of the co-teachers is absent, you must provide a sub. Obviously, this is easier said than done. I know this. I know you must be cussing me out. Like, you don't know my school. I try my best. I understand you do, girl. You do. But these are suggestions, right? If you can make it happen, make it happen. Observe co-teachers as a co-teaching admin team, right? So if you are going into a classroom and they are teaching parallel teaching, make sure the principal and the AP, the assistant principal, are observing one of the co-teachers in the room. So you need to do observations because you want to assess how well they're doing in co-teaching, not just teaching the whole group, right? Because they're not supposed to be doing that. They're supposed to be doing stations, parallel teaching, alternative teaching. You need to be assessing them on their co-teaching practice. Also having co-teaching walkthroughs, right? That is something that you can do. I have things I can share if you hire me that I've developed. They must share instructional responsibility because that's what you're assessing. Apart from them just instructing as teachers, they are co-teachers, right? Do they have a consistent behavior and classroom management plan? Do they co-assess? Are they progress monitoring the students evenly? Is there humor and joy in these classrooms, right? We don't talk about that. Is it difficult to tell the difference between the gen ed and the special educator? Because it should be difficult. Because oftentimes when I go into classes, I can tell who's a general educator. They have a different stance. They hold their body different. The special educator sometimes looks different, right? You could see they position themselves or they have been positioned as a subordinate, right? Their posture is different, right? So it's important that you can tell the difference. Also, you can't tell the difference between the students with disabilities and the students without disabilities in those co-taught classes. Also, are the IEPs being taught in the co-taught class? Is there modifications to the curriculum for the students with disabilities? Is there a fluid positioning of teachers and paraprofessionals in the classroom where no one is seen as a subordinate? Is this class rigorous? Is this class including and doing specially designed instruction, right? Oftentimes, co-taught classrooms look like another gen ed class. It shouldn't. It should look different, right? You have students with disabilities there. They should be taught things based on their IEP. Also, specially designed instruction, right? That's the role of the special educator. So is that being done? So these are just some things that structurally that you could be doing. Definitely, please holla at me, holla at your girl. If you want some more help with your school district, your state, your city, your country, hallelujah, I can do it. All right. Yes, and when I say hallelujah, that I am not one religion over the other. Okay, everyone is respected here. We are including everyone. Okay, all right. I will see you again for another video. Bye.